Hello everybody, it's me, Root Beer, and welcome to the first video of 2024. How's the new year treating y'all so far? Me personally, I got sick over the weekend, I had a sore throat, and then my PC crashed, so I was like, it's new year, figure I might as well just rebuild the computer, replace the motherboard and the power supply, try to fix the crashing issue, and evidently, I didn't do a very good job of it because now my computer won't turn on. That's why I'm in my living room on my laptop. But I digress. Now that we're in the new year and we have a new era of Vanguard coming with Divine Z, I figured it'd be fun to go look back at all of the old nations in Overdress and kind of do a bit of a nation review, just kind of give my thoughts and feelings about my personal feelings of the nation, like their place in the meta, at least from my perspective, and then, favorite and least favorite decks. I figure we could have a bit of fun in the new year instead of complaining all the time like I normally do. Alright, so first up is Dragon Empire. So I actually have a lot of Dragon Empire decks. I think currently I'm only missing Dragonic Overlord, and then I don't really plan on getting Shiranui once the Stride deck comes out, but yeah, I have a lot of Dragon Empire decks, but despite that, it doesn't really occupy a lot of my brain space. I've played a decent number of them. I played Nirvana early on. I took Bavsagra to a decent finish in BRO, I think it was in 2022, but the nation has never really jumped out at me. Nothing ever really clicked to a degree where I'm like, yes, this is my main deck. And so to me, Dragon Empire is always just yep, they exist. In terms of meta play, it's been a pretty consistent nation, I think. To me, Dragon Empire always feels like the eternal tier 2 nation. Early on, early Overdress, Nirvana competed pretty well. Bruce and Bastion were stronger, but Nirvana was a decent tier 2. And then come set 4, it was Prison, Magnolia, and Gravidia were really dominant early on. And then once Magnolia got hit, we started to see Mahar Nirvana getting played more. We also had Bavsagra, and then later on Tamayura that had pretty decent representation during that time. But I don't think they were ever truly considered the top tier of the meta relative to Prison and Gravidia. Later on when Overlord got the End and all of the promos that fixed the problems with the End, it was a good deck, but it also existed alongside other restanders like Minerva and eventually Lutetia, and on the whole was just overshadowed by Eva being the top deck at the time. And then just kind of kept going lower and lower as things like Youthberg and Chronojet came out to overshadow it. I think the current peak of their meta performance was Gondiva in set 10, which was the definitive top tier deck for its format, but also a month afterwards Wallista came out, and at least in the EN format was much more dominant. So maybe we'll see them coming into relevance with Shiranui. The deck has had mixed performance in Japan where it has a lot of representation, but does kind of start losing out in the top cuts. So you look at your top 4 and it's sometimes Shiranui gets a high top, sometimes it gets overcome by other things like Luard, Leohan, however that's pronounced, came out. So, but also here we don't have any of the collab decks like Bang Dream that competes well against Shiranui, so maybe it'll see different performance once it hits the EN format. In terms of my favorite deck from Dragon Empire, I like Tamayura aesthetically, I like fluffy fox girls, but playstyle wise the deck never fully clicked with me, plus being kind of price gated out by broken toys. I played Nirvana and Bavsagra early on, but I've had a bit of a roller coaster with both of them because neither of them really developed in the way that I wanted them to, and so I always just kind of felt my interest wasn't there for those decks in their modern iterations, I guess as of set 13 I'm kind of okay with Jiva now that it's got a main deck made up entirely of custom cards, but so Yeah, I don't know that I have a favorite Dragon Empire deck, which is really great for the premise of this video. I do have a least favorite deck, though, Dragonic Overlord. If you've been following the podcast, you'll know that I've never been a fan of Overlord all that much, but the specific way it developed in D, where it's this, like, casino deck, now that it has just a bunch of promos to fix the core issues with it, it's like, okay, well, if you get, like, Halbei that can act as a 2-for-1 discard and calls itself back, then you kind of negate the minus of restanding, and then you have the grade 2 that puts Dragonic Overlord into Soul, so you don't have to do the cross-ride naturally. You can just start off on Dote, so you're not playing really slowly and losing out on your Persona rides, but it's like, if you can't find either of those things, the deck just gets so much worse. And so it's just this really frustrating thing to play with and against, where it's like, all right, sometimes they just get the full setup and they like restand on you early and just completely annihilate you with crits. And sometimes the deck is just non-functional and it's sad. Next up is Dark States. I don't really like Dark States. The nation just never grabbed me. Like, I've given a shot to some of the decks. Like, I played Bruce in set 1 and then lost interest immediately in set 2. I tried to play Drejeweled when it first came out. Didn't click with me. You know, I gave Chaos a shot. Didn't like it very much. Astroya might be one of my least favorite decks of all time. And so, yeah, like Dark States as a whole, not for me. Although, funny enough, it does possess one of my favorite decks of all time, at least for D. We'll get to that when I do favorite and least favorite. In terms of meta performance, Dark States has had an interesting experience, like very peak and valley kind of thing, where Bruce was the top meta deck early on, but then has since fallen off completely with like Purple Bruce. You know, you have decks like Chronojet, where, you know, when it came out, it was like the top of the meta. So, you know, that was definitely like a peak there. And then currently, like Greedon and Drejeweled are both pretty good. But then you also have things like Lukier or Astroya. Like Borrow Magnus has just disappeared from the game entirely. So you have like some of the highest highs, like peak Chronojet, but also some of the lowest lows. In terms of favorite and least favorite, my favorite deck is Omina Grugio. Not only is this my favorite deck in Dark States, it might just be my favorite deck in D overall. Like, I think it just takes away a lot of the pain points from Standard. So, the Mask package makes for very easy discard fodder, like early in the game for your ride deck. So, sometimes, you know, you have to make a decision of what to discard. You know, you look at your hand, you're like, I want all of these though. And so you have to start thinking about like, okay, well, this doesn't have shield value, or this needs my opponent to be a grade 3, so maybe I can try to find one later, or I have 4 copies of this, but only 2 copies of that. So I will see the 4 of again, right? And then, you know, of course you don't see it at all. So having the mask package where it's like, you can discard the original, you can discard the mask if you already have like the mask unit. I'm also playing Laymina, so that's like another thing that I can discard. It's just really nice looking at my opening hand and not having to worry about like, oh, do I discard this important 4 of, or do I discard this 2 of and hope it doesn't come up in the game? And then, you know, nullifying defensive power takes away a lot of the RNG feeling of it. Like, oh, you got a defensive trigger? Too bad. Like, this is 30k and you're still at 13. So that's a really nice feeling, you know, for me. Maybe doesn't feel as good for the person sitting across from it, but I just like that it takes away some of that RNG aspect. And of course, like, reducing the shield value also gives it that sense of inevitability that eventually your big numbers will connect. Least favorite, probably Astroya. I tried to play it in set 10, did not click with me, wasn't having a very good time with it. Alright, moving on to the next nation, and it's time for Paladin bias, I mean Keter Sanctuary. So, another nation I own a lot of decks for, but unlike Dragon Empire, I actually do play and think about Keter decks. So, obviously, OTT guy, I appreciate Hexa Orb and being able to stack my deck like always, but in general, like, the Paladin playstyle is just kind of easy. right? Like, I think one of the appeals of Keter Sanctuary is just how straightforward the nation is. It's just, I guess the word for it is safe. Like, think about, like, Bastion, for example. Bastion is just like, number big, restand, get drive check for Bastion Accord. You know, Hex Orb is just OTT. You know, Phantom Blaster, more or less, is just the same as the original, though closer to the V version with being able to retire your opponent's cards too. And then PBO is just big number, more attacks. You know, MLB more or less resembles its original. Thagrea has a bit interesting going on with, like, the Persona Ride shenanigans, but on the whole, it's still just, like, a multi-attack deck, restanding. Youthberk, just Revolform, go Burr. You know, Minerva, restanding Vanguard, so, you know, etc, etc. But all in all, like, I like Keter Sanctuary. I think it's just, I can wrap my tiny lizard brain around the nation because of how straightforward it is. In terms of meta performance, Keter Sanctuary has done pretty well overall. Like, a lot of the other nations have pretty, like, extreme peaks and valleys, like Dark States, or are just kind of just underneath the meta, but Keter Sanctuary, a lot of them have either been, like, at the top of the meta, like Bastion, or are, like, pretty close to it and have at least, like, some amount of tops, right? So Bastion, like I said, top deck early in the game, and top deck again with Bastion Accord. Hexa Orb was in a pretty bad place for a long time, but kind of got a second chance with Aquamarine during set 10. Phantom Blaster, the original wasn't very good, but Overlord made it into the meta briefly during, like, set 4, set 5 format. Majesty Lord gets a scattering of tops here and there. It hasn't had the most impressive run in the meta, but, you know, it does show up every now and then. Thagrea was good during set 5. Had a little bit of an appearance during set 11, at least in Japan. I don't think it had as much performance in NA, though, or in EN format, I should say. Youthberk obviously was very good when Tempest came out, is good again with Youthberk Gamer Lights. Minerva, good deck during set 8, had a brief reappearance with its promos, although I feel like for the EN format, it hasn't made as much of an impact as it did in JP. Okay, Graham Grace and Solarion haven't done anything, but Ezel didn't really have an impact in EN again, but had a scattering of tops in JP during set 11, and Luard should be a good deck coming up, as well as Leohan. So, you know, I think Keter Sanctuary is actually, like, a very strong nation overall. In terms of favorite and least favorite, I'm just going to give to Hexa Orb, because, duh, OTT. Least favorite, I don't actually dislike any Keter deck in particular. Like, again, the nation is so, like, safe, and a lot of the, like, less meta prominent decks kind of play similarly to the ones that are good. They just have a few, like, issues that keep them out of the meta. So, you know, going into Keter Sanctuary, there's never been a deck that I, like, actively hate, either playing with or against. I guess the closest thing is me saying Thagrea is my nemesis because I had bad runs against it during BCS in 2022, but, like, that's a joke, right? I don't actually hate the deck. Alright, next nation, Stoicheia. So, Stoicheia is a deck that I have played a lot of. I think I've played every single ride line except for Magnolia, because Atlas has that. And again, like, it's one of the ones where even though I've played all of them in some capacity, I don't think about it too much. Like, I am kind of, like, cooking with Leonorn right now because it's still new with Vivace, but yeah, on the whole, like, I have forgotten about a lot of Stoicheia, and I feel like so has Bushiroad. They have the fewest ride lines out of the nations, I'm pretty sure, and, like, out of those ride lines, you have the 3 that are featured prominently in the anime, like Magnolia, Zorga, and Leonorn, and then the rest of them just kind of disappear into the background, right? Like, you have the Myth Arc, which is a manga collab, so they only got their 1 wave of support, and so far haven't gotten anything else. Like, Flagberg gets support, but none of it is ever good enough to really push the deck back into prominence, so it's just kind of disappeared from people's thoughts, I feel like. You know, Aurora was good in the beginning as, like, a decent rogue deck just because of the aggro potential, but now that every other deck has caught up to it in terms of early game, it like doesn't have anything special anymore, and people now just use the ride line to aggro in other decks. And Granfia just kind of has to have all of its support stapled onto Leonorn. I don't know where that came from, but yeah. Like, Stoicheia feels like a nation that Bushiroad just kind of forgot, and, you know, meta-wise, like, the decks that get support do stay prominent in the meta. Like, Zorga has been pretty good throughout its entire lifespan. I think pretty consistent tier 2 deck. Sometimes could arguably be tier 1, like with Mask Zorga. Magnolia kind of peaked with Elder. Magnolia Mask is a good card, but just hasn't really made a meta impact, and, you know, Leonorn is good right now with Vivace, which is, you know, pretty cool. So, yeah, like, it's fine, but another case of, like, peaks and valleys where, like, now that Rora, Flagberg, you know, Maelstrom have all kind of fallen off of the meta, it's like Bushiroad just kind of pretends they don't exist, even though technically they are still receiving support. And I just kind of forget Granfia is even a thing sometimes. In terms of least favorite decks, probably Zorga. I just kind of get annoyed by people forcing Zorga into conversation sometimes. Like, I know that's just kind of like irrational hating, but whatever. I'm a Zorga hater. I'll own that. Favorite? I don't know. Like, I tried to like Maelstrom and Rora, but neither of them ever really clicked with me. And again, Bushiroad just kind of forgot them in terms of support, even though, again, technically Rora got supported recently in set 11. And then, you know, I'm testing Leonorn right now with Vivace, but I don't know that I can call her my favorite either. Like, Stoicheia just kind of exists for me. Next up, we have Brantgate. So, I really respect the consistent design philosophy of Brantgate. I like that they've centered the nation around set orders. They've managed to do a lot of different and interesting things with the set orders, and they have a wide range of generic staples that are all pretty good and kind of universal, right? That being said, I don't actually like playing any Brantgate decks. I've tried to play them at various points, like I owned Eva for a while, and then that never clicked with me. I tried Avant-Garde, did okay with it, but again, never really clicked with me. And what else exists? Oh yeah, like Messiah I tried out for a little bit, just because, like, the Stride deck is pretty cheap, but again, like, Messiah just never clicked, right? So, you know, that is my story with Brantgate, is just every time I try to play it, I'm like, and then I move on. So, I respect Brantgate, I'm not sure I actually like it. Meta-wise, Brantgate was very strong during the first half of Overdress. So Prison early on was a pretty solid tier 2, becoming tier 1 when the grade 4 was released. You know, Gravidia was very powerful on release. Eva probably had one of the longer runs of meta relevance once she got her promos, up through like set 10. So from around set 6 to about set 10, so almost a good year or so. I believe Welstra was pretty good during set 10, I think it was, when he got like his product support. But in more recent times, like, I do think the nation has kind of fallen off a bit. Like, Gravidia hasn't gotten great support. You know, same with Eva. Welstra has just kind of disappeared, although he is getting more support with Divine Z, so he might be coming back. But yeah, like, more recently, they're just kind of there. Like, Messiah is fine. I think it did get some tops, at least in Japan. I can't remember for EN right now. Orphist is good right now. It had a pretty good run at Worlds, and the mask version is a sorry. It is a strong meta contender right now for Orphist Mask, but, like, I don't know, I just feel like it's not really part of the conversation, and looking at the meta in Japan after set 13 comes out, Orphist kind of falls off. So, I don't know. Like, Brantgate is just kind of not there right now. So favorite and least favorite. Least favorite, Orphist. I don't know. People were annoying about it early because he looked like Chaos Breaker, and then just don't really like playing against the Mask version right now. Favorite deck? I don't know. I don't have one, really. Like, I read the Craycross story, at least for the first part. Eva is, like, fun crazy. I like that. I don't like the deck. The next closest one is, like, Avant-Garde. Big mechs are cool, and I'm, like, attempting to play it for set 13, although it's not really clicking with me, to be honest. So, yeah, Brantgate, another nation that certainly exists. Again, I respect the design philosophy of Brantgate. I think having that really cohesive design around set orders is good. It's just that, like, actually playing Brantgate is not something I enjoy doing. And finally, we have everybody's favorite nation, Lyrical Monasterio. Lyrical is such a frustrating nation to think about. Like, the art sucks, right? Like, everything looks the same. It's all just same generic schoolgirl in, like, vague school setting. Like, I can't tell the cards apart from each other. Nobody likes Fish Season, you know, when it just takes up all of the reveals for the month, and oftentimes they cut it with, like, collab season, so it's like, ugh, because, like, just nothing is happening, right? And at the same time, Lyrical has some of the most, like, interesting and diverse gameplay. Like, there's so many cool and interesting ideas that exist in Lyrical that were either taken from old clans before the reboot, or just, like, new original ideas. So, you know, you have, like, Clarissa doing the multi-target attacks before Vermilion was introduced in D, kind of bringing back that old gimmick. Alestiel had the, like, black and white wing gimmick, which is really cool. You know, Laurel Nerl does different things with, like, her song orders. Same with, like, Michu, where you can kind of use the different set orders to give you different effects. And both of these came out before Avant-Garde was introduced. And then, you know, you have things like Hazaret and Mediel that were taking cues from, like, Spike Brothers and V Great Nature. So, like, gameplay and design-wise, like, Lyrical is so interesting, and it sucks that, like, the artwork and just the stigma of being, like, the leftovers of Bermuda Triangle kind of hamper people's enjoyment of Lyrical. Oh, also, like, Siana. Siana is a really cool defensive ability that we've not really seen before. So, yeah, like, Lyrical is such a cool nation in terms of actual gameplay. It's a shame that it's locked behind that stigma of Bermuda Triangle. But now that they're kind of being pushed into the main nations with the rest of the boosters, like, maybe that will change people's opinion on it when it's just one of the 6, right? Also, they're finally making artwork that isn't just generic schoolgirl number 3058. For what we know of Divine Z Lyrical so far, it looks like they're focusing on the bounce to hand as kind of the through line between old Bermuda Triangle and, like, kind of what the generic cards do. Like, we had Yuika that bounced to hand generically, so that seems to be the design direction they're leaning on now that Lyrical is just one of the nations and they're not having to shove, like, 5 into 1 whenever they support Lyrical, which is a-okay with me because I like bouncing the hand. Meta-wise, Lyrical is a pretty mixed bag, just a combination of its release schedule kind of coming out between, like, 2 or 3 other main sets, and just the sheer number of ride lines that exist. So, you have things like Laurel Nerl and Clarissa early on that were meta-relevant, but then, you know, like, Willista and Felty Rosa were terrible during that time. Grade 4 Kyrie was very strong when that came out, but then, you know, Herminia and Fortia on their initial release never really made an impact. Most of Lyrical 3, aside from Lutetia, is pretty forgettable. But then at the same time, you know, you have things like Charmo coming up, like Prism are going to be pretty good. Even during Lyrical 3, when most of them were pretty bad, like Lutetia ended up being a top deck. So again, that peaks and valleys where you have very powerful top tier meta decks and just forgettable garbage like Lilfa. Least favorite, again, like with Keter Sanctuary, I don't actually dislike anything in Lyrical so much as I just don't think about the decks that I don't care about. So I don't have like a least favorite. I guess like my attempts to make Lilfa work were kind of frustrating. I think that deck is just bad, and it kind of sucks that for a little while this was closer to what I wanted in an archetype that bounced things to your hand compared to Kyrie. Kyrie never clicked with me for some reason, so I guess I'm disappointed in it for that reason, but I wouldn't say I actually dislike it. Favorite? Feels weird putting a deck that's not out in English at the time of recording, but I just really like Prism, okay? Like, I just have to put Prism there. It's my favorite archetype. And yeah, so that was every nation. So overall, I enjoyed Overdress. You know, I understand not everyone loved the current standard format. Like, it's a pretty big departure from what we had before. The reduction in defensive value is something that we're still feeling now at the end of Overdress era. And, you know, things like the Overtrigger are kind of a bummer. Like, actual product has been kind of a mixed bag. Like, the change in ratios compared to the early days has made the game less affordable in recent times. You know, promos are definitely an issue, so Overdress was definitely not a perfect format. There's a lot of things that just turned people off of it, and I understand that, but personally, I've been having a good time with Overdress. Like, I've been more energized to play Vanguard in the last couple of years with Overdress than I did for the entirety of V, where I basically checked out of the game. Like, as bad as some of the things are in Overdress right now, I do think the, like, lowest lows of V format were worse, both, like, in terms of gameplay and, like, the wider effect on the player base. Not helped that a lot of those things happened in COVID times, so we couldn't go outside. But, yeah, I liked Overdress, and I'm looking forward to what's happening in Divine Z. I know the trial decks are not the best foot to start off, and the next video we can have a bit of a conversation about that. But for now, that's going to be it for this video. Like if you like it, leave a comment, tell us, what do you think of all the nations? What's your favorite, least favorite nation? Which decks did you like from every nation? Let us know in the comments. That's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye!